Thank you for being with us tonight. Today, we're having a very interesting interview with one of the climate reality leaders from South Africa. So, stay tuned. This is eConnect. My name is Eric Vasquez. Welcome. During the first ever global training of the Climate Reality Leadership Core, we had one of the panels called Digital Media, Engaging an Online Community. And well, they talked about how you can make your communication effective using social media and other different tools to reach more people and spread the word about the climate emergency we are living on. Well, today we're bringing you one of those panelists. Let's welcome Nicole Rodel. So we are here with Nicole Rodel. Let me introduce a little bit of what she's been doing. Nicole Rodel currently works as the communications officer of the Climate Reality Project in South Africa. She specializes in environmental and advocacy journalism and is a professional multimedia content producer. Hello, Nicole.
Hi, Eric. Thanks so much for having me here today.
Well, thank you for granting us with this interview, and thank you for your time. We know that you guys are very busy. You've been just done with the global training, so thank you very much for being with us tonight. Nicole, could you please let us know a little bit about yourself? I already introduced you, but we would like to know how is it that you started fighting against climate change? What motivated you to start this advocacy?
Sure. So when I was a student, I was studying journalism with a specialization in radio and broadcast. And then theoretically, I was focusing my work on environmental and advocacy journalism. Back then, a large focus of mine was around wildlife conservation, biodiversity, and anti-poaching. But I think the more that I worked within that space, I saw the link, or the very important link between people and environment, and how everyone should have a role to play in the decisions that affect their immediate environment. And I think that it became more clear that people kept saying to me, why should these communities care about the environment when they're facing so many other issues? Shouldn't we deal with those first? And the more I looked into it and looked into the environmental justice issues that a lot of communities in South Africa face, you can see how they're so cross-cutting and intersectional with each other when it comes to having proper waste management, water and sanitation. All of those things relate to the environment. And from there, then, obviously, as I was learning and growing my own journalistic and personal philosophy, I started learning more about climate change and how that relates to everything in our environment, and how it is kind of like an umbrella over all the issues that people are currently facing, and how climate justice and environmental justice are very linked with social, racial, and gender justice issues. And that really was the beginning of my journey. And along the way, I've learned so much more and connected with some very amazing people, very inspiring people, and also had the opportunity to connect with communities that are faced with these issues and helped raise their stories, which I think is the most important part of my work, is being a platform to give others' voices a chance to be heard, which is something that I love about the work that I do. And obviously, I believe that it's very important and something that people should be talking more about.
Yeah, that's right. And now that you're mentioning giving people a voice, that is very important. I know in South Africa, there are a lot of different ethnic groups.
Well, there's over 50 separate ethnic groups in South Africa. Currently, we, rather than focusing on ethnic groups in terms of like the official documentation, we have 11 official languages, which don't encompass every single ethnic group in the country. But I like to say there's 12 because recently South African Sign Language was recognized as an official language as well. And then I think it isn't quite representative within official documentation because often people are asked to clarify themselves based on race rather than their ethnic groups. So it's not quite as representative of the diversity that we have within our country. So I think rather than looking at the different ethnic groups, the different language groups, people are very much represented in the mainstream media based on their race or based on the communities that they live in. I wouldn't say that climate justice issues are very well represented or spoken about in the mainstream media. We have a small handful of very dedicated climate justice and environmental journalists in the country, but it's definitely not something that is front page news every day as it should be, and definitely not something that a lot of people know about. The general public, obviously, one of their main connections to all of this information is the media themselves. And so if it's not spoken about, they don't know about it. I think that a lot of the communities that are affected by climate justice and environmental justice issues are a result of the apartheid regime, where they were forced to move to those areas and where then the dirtiest developments and polluting industries were pushed into those areas as well. And so you find that sort of richer white communities don't have a clear idea of what's actually happening in these communities. It's very much out of sight, out of mind when it comes to those issues. Obviously, organizations such as ourselves and community-based organizations, we are the ones that are pushing this message and supporting media in also pushing this message into the public eye and into the public domain and trying to get that message out there. But I think that a lot still needs to be done to make the general public realize that these issues are happening and that there is something that they can do about it.
Actually, I would like to know, talking about these differences and gaps in society when referring to economical or financial situations, how are the most vulnerable being affected by climate change there in SA?
Yeah, well, I think the world over, you see that poorer communities are the ones that are most vulnerable and most affected by climate impacts. And then here in South Africa, they're not only affected by climate impacts and extreme weather, but they're impacted by the climate change causing industries. So they're sort of trapped between suffering climate impacts like droughts or extreme floods and storms, while also breathing in polluted air or only having access to polluted water or no longer being able to grow their own food and grow their crops because the soil is polluted. So it's these sort of two terrible things coming from either side of them. And I think that it also affects women a lot more in South Africa as well, where there are very many women-led households who are affected by these things and who are the ones that are growing their own food, nurturing the environment, but they're still impacted by both climate justice issues and climate change itself. If you look at, so one of the communities that I've traveled to in South Africa, its name is Lephalale. It's based in the Limpopo province. And in that community, they are coal affected. They're surrounded by coal-fired power plants and coal mines, but there's also very heavy drought in that area at the same time. And of course, we know that the coal industry is a very water-intensive industry as well. So the water that is in that community is going towards the coal plants rather than the community. And that same community is working in those coal-fired power stations, but don't have access to electricity themselves. So that is, that's one of the things that when I first started working with Climate Reality really gave me a new perspective on the climate justice issues that are very much connected with racial, social, and gender justice in our country. And yeah, I think that more of these stories, because it's not just that community, it's happening in so many communities across South Africa, and across the world, where people are faced with all these different issues all at once. And the connection is still not being made. So I think South Africa itself declared disaster zones where there were intense droughts in areas, but they are not then addressing the root cause of those droughts and why they are more extreme, and that's because of climate impacts. Instead, they are saying, they're digging more boreholes, trucking in water tanks to provide the communities with water, while not actually addressing the real issue.
Yeah, that's. If we watch documentaries about different issues that happen in South Africa, I think we can really see how obvious it is that people are really struggling, sometimes not even heard by the different authorities or different organizations. Even organizations have their hands full with all the work that there is to do. And that is something that I want to connect with this. Now, knowing that there are issues, how is the branch of the Climate Reality Project in South Africa helping these voices to be heard or to be represented?
Well, one of the projects that we have so the majority of our projects extend throughout the continent, but the one project we have is South Africa specific, and it works to address these very issues. So the project is called Action 24, Active Citizens for Responsive Legislatures. And basically the project is aiming at improving public participation in environmental governance. So helping people get to the point where they are able to engage with these public participation processes and have their say when it comes to decisions that are going to affect their community. So it's around commenting on legislation, commenting on upcoming or proposed developments. And what we do is we work in four provinces of the country, and we support community-based organizations who are directly linked to these communities to help spread this information. We host workshops, we assist people in drafting their submissions, which is an official form of participation where you can comment on proposed legislation or proposed developments, and helping people understand that they can have their say once they can realize their rights through participating in these processes that are entrenched in democracy. So our democracy is a combination of a representative democracy where we have our elected representatives, as well as a participatory democracy where the public is supposed to participate in these processes, in governance, so that they can have a direct say. What I will say, though, is that these processes are maybe not working the way that they should in practice. There are great policies surrounding how it should be done, but there is not enough responsiveness from the legislatures themselves. I mean, myself, I've submitted submissions, I've commented on legislation, and the most I've gotten is a response of receipt that they have received my submission. I've never had any further sort of response from the legislatures or from the various committees themselves. I know through the project that this is an issue that many people face, where there's a disconnect between the representatives and the people. And I think that the government or the current office that we have, there are so many issues with that itself. But yes, the public participation processes at the moment are perhaps not as recognized as they should be. But it also comes down to that only 2 out of 10 people in South Africa know how to participate in these processes. And so you're getting a very small percentage of people that are actually using them. And because there's such a small percentage, it's not making as much of a difference as it could. If more people were demanding to have their say, demanding that these processes be improved, there could be some improvement and they could be more effective. And that's something that we are trying to do through this project, is spread the word, get people to be involved in these processes, do your submissions when either the legislature calls for submissions, or you can do one at any time you want. It also looks into oversight, how to hold representatives accountable. And that can be done through budget analysis, looking at what was proposed versus what was actually done, based on following the money, following the trail of money into communities and developments and so on. And yeah, we're hoping that we can have an impact through that. There's a lot of materials that we've developed, educational materials people can use. I can tell you that they worked because before the project, I didn't know how to use these processes. There isn't enough information about this. The public isn't being told. But I've used those educational materials, the step-by-steps on how to do this. And I've managed to make several submissions, several petitions, and feel confident in engaging my representatives through using those formats. So it is something that we're still working on and that we hope more people will begin to use.
Knowing that you are a journalist, what do you think content writers should be writing about when talking about climate justice?
So I think that people really should be going to the ground more, speaking to community voices more, and finding out what the real experiences are. I mean, when we talk about climate change, often for many who maybe don't understand the full intricacies of the issue, it seems like a distant problem. But if you go to the communities and you speak to them and you can understand the issues that they're facing, those are the stories we should be telling, putting a face to climate change. It's not something far away. It's not something that only future people in the future will experience. It's happening here and it's happening now in our country, in our communities, and to our people. And by helping them, giving them that platform to have their voice heard, it can help bring that story home for so many people, I think. And it's something that isn't done enough. I think that, like I said earlier, there's only a small handful of dedicated journalists who focus on climate and environmental justice issues. I think that's also very much to do with, in our mainstream media, there's no longer journalistic beats, what we call, or rather journalistic themes, where someone, for instance, will cover business and economics, someone will cover environment. It's more like everyone is covering whatever story is coming out. But I think that there should be more people dedicated to this, and there should be, I think it's also part in getting NGOs and community-based organizations more connected with the media, because it can be difficult when there's a new story to tell every single day for them to go out and be collecting all of this information. So something that I actively do through our work is engaging with journalists. Community-based organizations need to engage with journalists to have their stories told, so there's a role for everyone to play there in terms of having this message heard.
What advice would you give to people who would like to start their advocacy as a climate leader, or as a climate fighting against climate change? What advice would you give someone that is starting now?
For someone who's just starting out, I would first say, do your research. Find out all the things that you need to know. Make sure that you have the science under wrap, that you understand what are the impacts, the causes, the solutions, so that as soon as someone asks you a question, you have that information. I would also encourage people to make sure that when they are doing research, that they're looking at reputable sources. There is a lot of disinformation out there. Luckily, climate denialism is not a thing in South Africa, but people aren't aware of the scale of the problem itself. So I would encourage people to read. Obviously, as a climate reality leader, there are all the resources that you would need through the Reality Hub. But I would also look at, if you don't have access to Reality Hub and you're not a trained climate reality leader, I would suggest looking at different organizations such as the Climate Reality Project, going through their websites, going through their news. And there's plenty of free resources there that people can use. I would also suggest connecting with a community-based organization or an NGO in your area to find out how you can get involved. There are already so many campaigns and projects out there. It can be difficult to start one all on your own. So if you're new to it, I would suggest connecting with someone in your area who is already involved in the movement, and they can support you as you learn how to find your feet in this space. Something I would also recommend, being involved in the climate movement, particularly when it comes to sort of overwhelming feeling of the latest scientific facts and the latest stories around climate impacts around the world. Your wellness is very important. Your mental wellness is very important when it comes to the climate movement. So that's the last thing I would recommend, is taking care of yourself, knowing when to unplug, knowing that it's okay to not do an active leadership every single day. Sometimes you do need a break. You need to refresh and recharge and come back ready to dive in again. Because, it can get overwhelming at times, but we know that this work is so important, and everyone who can be involved should be involved. So take that first step as soon as you can, and there are plenty of organizations that can support you in doing that.
Thank you very much for your advice and these recommendations. I hope people who are watching really feel inspired and they start going through or seeking organizations who can help them, right? If they want to start. Nicole, I would love to so much we could converse about how journalism is very important when talking about climate change and climate justice. But the time is right now is very short. So I just want to thank you a lot for giving us this interview, sharing your time with us and sharing your words.
Well, I can also share with you so that you can continue this conversation on your own. We do have resources. We do have a toolkit for reporting on the climate crisis that can be helpful to journalists who perhaps aren't so familiar with the subject matter and looking at where they should start. So you can check that out on our website.
Perfect. Yeah, we would love that information. We can post it together with this interview. Okay, Nicole, thank you very much. And I hope we can talk again soon. Have a good afternoon, day. What is it there?
It's still the morning here, but yes, thank you so much, Eric, for inviting me to this interview. And I look forward to chatting to you soon. And I hope people find this the information useful.
Well, as we just heard from Nicole, there is still a lot of work to do in engaging grassroots communities from different places. South Africa is just one of the places that is really struggling with it, but not the only one. There are several places all over the world that are going through the same issues. Ethnic groups not being well represented, people from different backgrounds not having equity. So again, we are urging you to engage in your online communities and make sure you are representing everyone. It doesn't matter what skin color you have. It doesn't matter what is your background. Try to make your dialogue open to everyone and diverse. So this way we can all work together into making a better world. Again, thank you to Nicole for having this interview. The reason I wanted to bring Nicole to the conversation is because she is a journalist, and I would like to talk about how journalism is actually one of the tools that we are not completely using in this climate emergency. We've seen a lot of different movements online. We've seen the young people creating different campaigns, and we've seen a lot of different participation, but still, there is a lot more to do, and we are trying to call all content writers and journalists to start talking and really dedicating the time to address this climate emergency. We have seen through time how journalism has been that tool that has helped a lot of people to actually say the truth and solve cases that other institutions were not able to. So it is because of the work that journalists are doing that we can have a better society. Now, it is very important when journalism talks about those who are in power and abuse that power, then it becomes a weapon against them. And mostly people who are in that situation that don't want the truth to come out start suppressing journalists. We've seen it before in the interview we had with Laura Morales and Patricia Nunez, how journalists are being attacked in Latin America, how journalists die every day all over the world, not only in Latin America, but in different places. So once again, journalism is that powerful. We need to use it to start curbing this climate emergency. So journalism is a weapon that should be taken with responsibility, and people who are dedicated to this profession should only talk about facts and no other. This way, we can have information that is real, true, and honest. I dream of the day when journalists won't be afraid of writing and talking about the truth, when journalism will be given that power that it requires, and people who are content writers take it with responsibility. That's why we really appreciate your support, your shares, your likes, your thumbs up, and of course, all your comments and suggestions. Help us keep this channel as an independent channel, and share the videos, share the interviews. Help us give people the voice they don't have. We will continue bringing different people talking about different issues all over the world, and we can do it with your support. My name is Eric Vasquez. Thank you for being with us tonight. You were watching eConnect.